All right, welcome to another episode of Medicine Mondays. Yours truly, Dr. Pierre, host of Medicine Mondays, Real Physician Reacts, as well as the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry podcast. And this week, we're going to be talking about the approach of just everything we do here on this channel. And hopefully for you moving forward, how are we going to end the second half of the year like we hopefully started at the beginning of the year? And I know we have a lot of new people who come across the channel, whether it be via one of my social media posts that I've done on TikTok or even this YouTube channel or a new podcast listener. And I like to kind of refresh my new audience on what it means to follow Dr. Barry Pierre, right? And I think it's important, right? Because, you can follow anyone. There's a lot of healthcare providers giving amazing information on the World Wide Web, whether you're a YouTuber, whether you're on TikTok, Instagram, there's a lot of amazing healthcare providers giving some great information. So I want to kind of make sure I put my feather in my hat and kind of help guide my audience, who I like to call the Lunch and Learn community, right? Because especially if we go back, we could do a little history lesson maybe later on in this show, but if we go back and, go back to the Lunch and Learn community, I like to kind of give them the blueprint of what it means to think like a doctor. Like if you're following my channel or following one of my social media platforms, deep down inside, whether you want to admit it or not, you want to think like a doctor, right? You want to be able to make decisions that are based on, I hope, good, sound, fundamental, and accurate information. Because that's what doctors do. Doctors take in vast loads of information, process it very quickly, hopefully, and are able to take the action steps, right? If that sounds like you, let me know, right? Hit a like, comment, wherever you see this clip. I just want to know if I'm kind of going in the right direction. So I want to kind of bring the audience and refresh the old audience, and more importantly, introduce the new audience to thinking like a doctor. Because if you do that, whether you're listening to me talk about, autism, whether you listen to me talk about hypertension, diabetes, cholesterol, whatever topic you hear come from this channel, you're going to be able to kind of process it and say, all right, how can I turn this information? And maybe it's not directly beneficial to me personally, but maybe it'd be beneficial to someone I love, someone in my family, because that's always the most important thing. Because in medicine, there's so many different topics to touch on that you can't possibly touch on all of them all at once and appease every single population whenever you're doing something like this. But you can do a great job being consistent at the things that are extremely important and not necessarily the most popular, right? There's going to be some medical topics we talk about on here that, again, doesn't touch on everyone, but again, the people who it does touch on, we want to make sure we're also giving them a voice. I think that's the most important thing, especially when we talk about being able to think like a doctor. More importantly, the motto, empower yourself for better health, right? So that's just the goal of the channel in general, right? Whether you follow me on any of my social media platforms, at the end of the day, I want you to be able to say, you know what? Thanks to Dr. Barry Pierre, I think I can think like a doctor just a little bit more. If you don't get nothing else, it's, you know what? Dr. Barry helps me think like a doctor and be able to make the decisions, the informed decisions that I think are important, right? So let's give a kind of an outline, right, of what does it even mean, right? Because it sounds good to say think like a doctor. It sounds great. But what does that actually mean, especially for the person who isn't really health inclined, but they follow a channel like this because they want to be health inclined. They want to know a little bit more about what's going on with themselves or one of their family members, but they don't want to have to go to medical school or nursing school. They don't want to have to do all of that education. They just want the nitty gritty, hey, let me just see Dr. Barry can kind of educate me real quick on what's going on, right? So I want to break this down. Key concepts, right, to think like a doctor, right? So first and foremost, right, the fundamental practice of thinking like a doctor, what does that even mean? It's saying, hey, you know what? I recognize that there's a problem, whatever that problem is. For those who are watching and listening to this, think about what your problem is and just recognize that it's there. Because you'd be surprised how many patients I take care of who don't recognize that a problem is afoot, who don't recognize that, hey, you know what? That mole on my back looks funny and I should get that checked out, who don't recognize, hey, you know what? That numbness and tingling I'm feeling in my foot, it shouldn't last this long. I stubbed my toe last week. Why am I still feeling the symptoms? I should go check that out. So one and more importantly is recognizing, hey, I have a problem. Number two, right, again, in our pursuit of thinking like a doctor, even for the person who's not necessarily health inclined, is recognizing, okay, where can I get actual and factual information? Because I think that's important, because you can get a lot of information. You on the web, online, you can get a lot of information. But question is, can you get factual information? Can you get truthful information? That is going to be the key for you. And that's why you follow me, right? If you don't, make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You follow me because you want to make sure that the information that is coming out of my mouth is actually factual, right? That is actually accurate. That isn't going to put you in a bind where all of a sudden you do more harm than good. Because it's one thing to look for the information, right? You recognize, hey, I got a problem. It's another thing to look for the information and then go to find something that's inaccurate and that steers you down the wrong path. And then all of a sudden, you're eating like horse, manure or doing something wild that I don't even want to think about, but it's possible because of the World Wide Web, right? So understanding where can I get this factual information from, and then recognizing, all right, am I at the point where I need some assistance? I think this gets overshadowed a lot, especially in healthcare, especially when we talk about our healthcare providers, is that we are constantly asking for help. We are constantly asking for assistance. I'm an internist. I've been doing this for over a decade. Yeah, I've seen a lot of patients. I've seen a lot of different disease courses, but I'm also not afraid to say, you know what? I don't know about that. We had Dr. Lakeisha on here, and first of all, great episode you should check out, talking about perimenopause. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not want to come to Dr. Barry about perimenopause. You should go to her about perimenopause. And again, I'll make sure they throw a link up over my head so you can get a link to her episode. That was fire. It's amazing. She has her own podcast as well. But there are certain things that, hey, you know what? I can be smart in my lane. I could be low-key a genius in my lane, but I need to know when I can get help. And if you want to come on this channel and think like a doctor, if you want to go out and say, hey, you know what? Because I follow Dr. Barry, I know what I need to do. You got to understand when you need help. Because yes, you can buy the supplement online. You can buy, the natural thing online, but you got to recognize, hey, you know what? This mole on my back is not getting any smaller. It's not looking any prettier. I need to go get help. You got to recognize, hey, you know what? I get pretty dizzy when I wake up in the mornings, or you know what? My blood sugar is out of whack. Like, you got to recognize when you need help. Because again, if you want to think like a doctor, and I want everyone to think like a doctor, I'm not saying I want everyone to be a doctor. I don't want y'all to put me out of business. I'm not saying I want everyone to be a doctor. I just want everyone to think like a doctor, because you are allowed to think like a doctor. I know you'll hear some people say, oh, they don't like patients who Google everything. No, if you do it in an informed way, your doctor is going to love you. Your doctor is going to love the fact that you are taking just as much onus and control in your healthcare. What your doctor is not going to love is if you go down the wrong path, you follow the wrong thing, you go down the wrong blog or website, and now you're trying to tell the doctor, hey, this blog and website that is incorrect tells me this is how you should be doing it, and I want you to do it this way. And that's when you're going to run into a problem. You're not going to run into any problem if you talk to your doctor and you're giving them factual information to follow up on. You're going to run into that roadblock, I like to say, in healthcare, right? When you're telling your doctor things that are just totally just not true. That happens, unfortunately, more often than not, right? So it's important to understand that those key factors are key, like chess pieces in your pursuit to think like a doctor. If you're following me, I want you to come in as this fresh-faced person who is just kind of interested in their health, or interested in, just kind of learning about some medical issues, because maybe you got a family member dealing with it. Maybe you're young and you're super healthy and you're not having no problems, but your parents, your grandparents, your mom, your dad, your uncle, someone older than you or someone in your family is dealing with this issue, and you just want to be a little bit more informed. So you come to Dr. Barry's channel to think like a doctor. It's extremely important. And one thing I will say, and I think it has to be stressed, and again, my docs do such a great job at it that I don't think it gets the level of importance that it needs to. You got to understand, in this pursuit of thinking like a doctor, aka empowering yourself for better health, aka trying to do the right things to live a happier and healthier life, this is a life or death situation. And I don't mean in the immediate run. Like, not taking care of your blood pressure is a life or death, decision. Not taking care of your diabetes is a life or death situation. Not doing well for your cancer prevention screenings, your vaccine prevention screenings can be a life or death decision. So if you're ready to think like a doctor, understand you are ready to say, you know what? I am ready to make these life or death decisions, because if I don't, they will be made for me. I don't want people to think that there's an easy way out. Like, all right, if I don't make these decisions, if I don't act like my health is important, I'm not going to have to worry about it. No. The decisions are going to be made. The question becomes, do you want to make that decision? Do you want to make the decision to control your blood pressure, control your blood sugar, control your cholesterol? Do you want to make the decision to make sure your cancer prevention screenings are up to date for your family members? Do you want to make that decision, or do you want that decision made for you outside of your control? For what I know, a lot of you guys like control. Again, hit me in the comments if you don't. A lot of you guys like the control that you have in your lives, but for some reason you allow others to make the decision for you when it comes to your health. I don't want other people making the decision for me when it comes to my health. That's why I started this channel. And that's the reason why a lot of people follow me, right? Whether you're following me on my platforms, is because you want to somewhat make the decision on your own. You want to have some type of control, how your life is going to go in regards to your health. So understand these health decisions are life and death situations, right? And some of the challenges, let's talk about the challenges, right? Because it's easier said than done. It's easier said than done to say, hey, you know what? I need to recognize a problem. But how are you going to recognize a problem if you don't even realize that you're dealing with a problem? I want you to think about that. Like, how do I recognize that my blood pressure isn't, accurate? Like, how do I recognize that my blood pressure should be much better controlled or is not controlled? How do I recognize these things? And this is where the introduction starts. This is where you start saying, hey, you know what? Dr. Barry's talking about high blood pressure today. I'm going to just go check it out. I'm just going to check out what he's talking about in regards to high blood pressure, because I think it's important. And I'm going to check out what he's talking about when it comes to diabetes. I'm going to check out what he's talking about when it comes to cancer prevention, colon cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, whatever cancer you choose from. We probably talked about it here on the show. I'm going to check that episode out because I don't know what I don't know. And I think that's important. You turn it to, this series, whether you're my YouTuber or you listen to this on a podcast, you turn and you listen because you just want to be as informed when it comes to making decisions, but you want to be able to recognize when something is awry. And if you go about your day, head in the clouds, head in the sand, you're just up or down. You're not even looking for it. You can easily bypass the warning signs that are in front of you saying, hey, something could be a problem. And I think it's important because, again, you're not a doctor, right? Again, we understand you are not a doctor. I am not expecting you to be a doctor. You're not going to leave this channel saying, I'm ready to be a doctor. That's not the case. But you should be able to leave this channel recognizing you have a problem, understanding where are some sources that you can go to learn about your problem that are accurate, and then recognizing, hey, I need some help. I've gotten to the point where I've done the information, I've done my homework. Now I need some help, especially if I want to be the decision maker in this life or death decision, which is my health. If I want to be the one who makes the decision, I don't want someone else to make the decision for me. I got to do it. When someone comes to the hospital, let's give that example. When someone comes to the hospital and they've already had the stroke, they're not in the decision-making process of whether they take their blood pressure or not. They're not in the decision-making process of whether they're going to take their cholesterol medication or not. They're not in the process of whether they're going to go to rehab or not. I am the decision guy now, right? Like, I've taken that away from them because they didn't take their blood pressure medication when they were supposed to take it. They didn't make sure their cholesterol wasn't in check. They didn't make sure their diabetes wasn't in check. So guess what? They said, you know what? I'm going to forego the decision-making in this, and I'm going to give it to a random doctor that I just met 5 minutes ago because I suffered a stroke at home. How many of you, again, want to be able to make that decision or want the decision made for you? If we're going to think like a doctor, it's because we want to make the decision. We want to make the decisions on our behalf to live a happier, healthier life. And we cannot do that if we, again, don't recognize that we have an issue, don't recognize where to get accurate information on that issue, and don't recognize when we're going to get some help, right? Like, what I'll do is I'm going to, for those who are on my YouTube or if those who are on my podcast, I'm going to create an infographic on, just thinking like a doctor. I'm going to create a nice little infographic on it, just so you have it, in your own kind of coffer to kind of recognize, like, all right, yeah, I need to get my stuff together, right? I need to stop playing games. Like right now, I need to think like a doctor. I'm going to hear my steps to think like a doctor. I want everyone to do well, right? Where there's the month of July, where the second half of the year, depending if you're listening to this when it first drops, second half of the year, 2024, we got plenty of time to get to our goals at the end of 2024. And I think for a lot of my newcomers, and just a refresher for my old timers who've been around since the Facebook days, and I call it my lunch and learn community because we used to do this on my lunch break, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12 to 1. There are certain people who have been following me since then. I love y'all for it. There are certain people who have been following me since before we did the podcast podcast, right? Because it was the Facebook, there was the podcast, and we eventually came, like, there are certain people who've been following me that long. And I want to make sure that we hit that refresher course for them as well, too. Hey, like, are you doing what you need to do? Are you recognizing, like, hey, I'm a little bit older now, right? Again, I've been doing this for a decade. So think about it. There's been certain people who've been following me over a decade doing this, right? This education, this, this teaching of, just my community, my Lunch and Learn community. And I love y'all for that. So are y'all doing the things that need to be done, right? To make sure that 2024 is a good year for y'all. And then I just want to just a finale, right? Just to kind of bring it together, right? What does this do, right? What does thinking like a doctor mean to you? It means that I am going to have the best relationship with a couple people. One, myself. I'm going to have the best relationship with myself. I'm going to take my health in my hands, but I'm going to do it like a doctor would, right? I'm going to recognize when I have a problem. I'm going to recognize, where to get, factual information to say, hey, is this the problem? Is there some remedies? And then I'm going to recognize when I need to get some help, right? So I'm going to do it in that think like a doctor mode, right? Because I want to, again, have a better relationship with myself, right? I'm also going to have the most amazing relationship with my loved ones. Because if you are healthy, if you are doing what you need to do to be the best self, right, it's going to become infectious. It's going to become infectious. You've seen it before. You might have a family member, they just started changing their diet and, all of a sudden they're not really eating cookies like that no more. They're not really drinking those sweets no more. They're exercising a little bit more. They're just doing things that are a little bit different. And you're like, all right, if Barry's going to do that, I might as well just do something. I may not go full throttle, but I may do something, right? So I want you to be able to recognize, hey, I have to do a little bit more because I see Barry doing a little bit more. So now you looking after yourself and having a better relationship with yourself is now kind of seeding to others because they're saying, hey, you know what? If Barry thinks he could do it, I should be able to do it as well too. And I think the best relationship, and I'll be honest, I am biased. The best relationship to have is the doctor-patient relationship. And when you're thinking like a doctor and you are improving and you're working on your doctor-patient relationship, guess what? That becomes, hand in hand. All of a sudden, you have the doctor, right, who obviously thinks like a doctor. And now you have the patient who says, you know what? I'm not a doctor. I don't want to be a doctor, but I want to take matters in my own hand. I want to educate myself. I want to empower myself for better health. I want to do these things. And because I want to do these things, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to make sure that my doctor recognizes that we're in the same team. You might be, hey, doc, you're the captain of my ship, right? But I'm on the boat as well, too. I might want to steer if you need a break, too. I might want to, at least read the map so I know where I'm going to, right? So having that amazing doctor-patient relationship is so key. And will be a driving force in you making the life or death decision when it comes to your health versus someone else making those decisions for you. And we don't get anything else is that we want to make the life or death decisions in our health, not someone else, right? So understanding that there are some relationships that need to be fostered and cared for when you say, I want to think like a doctor. I want to think like a doctor. I'm following Dr. Barry Pierre, right? His YouTube. I'm following his podcast, right? Because I want to think like a doctor. I want to make sure the decisions I'm making are on my behalf. I want to empower myself for better health, right? I want to do all of these things that he says that I should be able to do, right? And he says I don't need to be a full-blown doctor to do so, right? I definitely don't need a full-blown doctor to do so. I just need to think like a doctor to get me to where I need to be, right? So again, we love everything from that standpoint here. So I just want to make sure we got all of these things kind of nipped in the butt, right? So if we get nothing, right? If we get nothing from this week's episode, right? As we start the descent of the year, right? We're past month 6, right? So now it's just downhill from there before we get up to 2025, which I swear happens. Like you look up and half of the year is gone. How many of y'all are like, hold on, we're in July already? Right? Especially again, depending if you when you're watching or listening to this. And you think about yourself like, yes, that is just how quickly time flies. So the question becomes, in this first 6 months, did I make the decisions on my behalf for my health, or were the decisions made for me? And do I have time to change my answer? If the answer was, you know what, the decisions were made for me. Like I didn't really pay attention to my blood pressure. I didn't really pay attention to my blood sugar. I know I'm 50. I know I'm 45. I know I'm 40. I know I'm supposed to get these type of screenings. I didn't get them done yet. All right. I got to do better, right? Like if that is what your first half of the year is, we got to change that. We got to change so that by the time 2025 comes around, down, right? Those quote unquote resolutions, right? To get ourselves better, to get ourselves feeling better about ourselves. Hopefully health isn't one of them, right? Because we are doing the things, AKA we are thinking like a doctor. We are doing the steps that are needed to proceed us in the best light, because we do not want others to make the decision and taking care of our health for us. That is not something we want to bring into 2025. In 2025, we want to be as deliberate when it comes to our health, as deliberate when it comes to recognizing, hey, where can I get the best information? As deliberate as solidifying those relationships that are around us that are going to just make us the best person that we can be. And if we don't get anything else, like, our goal should always be, just like Dr. Pierre's motto, empower yourself for better health. And to do so, we have to ask ourselves, am I ready to make the decision that I don't want others to have to make for me? And I think after this episode, you probably have your answer. After this episode, you probably know where Dr. Barry wants you to lean, right? Because again, I want you to be able to watch this episode and be like, you know what? I got to follow more of Dr. Barry, right? Because if he's going to get me right, and if he's going to get me to the point where I'm making my own decisions, like, this is a person I need to follow. There's a whole bunch of docs out here you can follow. They're great. Trust me, I follow them too. But there's going to be some seasoning here that you're probably not going to get from others, right? I'll be honest, I'm a toot my own horn, right? So again, yours truly, Dr. Barry. Make sure you check out another amazing episode next week. Make sure you hit the subscribe notification bell. And if you're my podcast listener, bring yourself over to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We want more YouTube subscribers over here. Y'all be blessed. See you guys next week.